I was asked recently by someone about how to get into the zone, and there was a time where I was going to an audition, and I was in my head a lot, and every time I had gone to an audition for a long time, I kept getting in my head and worrying about it. And then one day I went into the audition, but before I did it, I talked about the audition as if it already had happened. So I started saying to my friend, before I went into the audition, I started saying, do you remember when I went into that audition and I just nailed it? Like, I don't know what happened, but I got into a zone and I started feeling so good and everything. And as I started talking that way, my mind started seeing it as totally possible and feeling really good. And all of a sudden the stress started to go away that I had had for years. And I realized this thing, when you talk from the outcome of where you want to be, it gets you to be in this flow that's really amazing. So before the audition, I started being like, dude, do you remember when I went into that audition and I don't know what happened, but I started feeling so good and I felt so powerful, and I started getting into a zone and I started just being really happy, and I started playing and they started really liking everything I said, and they got into a zone, and I just shifted them by getting to this place where I da-da-da. As I started saying that, my mind started picturing everything that I said as possible and really getting there. And a lot of times people say you got to envision what you want, but they don't realize that when you're picturing something, you're not only picturing it, you're also picturing if it's working. So if you're sitting here going, I can totally see myself in the future making $1 million, you're also spending time going, is it working? So your mind is back and forth between monitoring if it's working and actually envisioning it. But if you talk about something like it already happened, it changes everything, because your mind stores it as a past event, so it sees it as fact. So if I start saying about anything, let's say, I wanted to make my relationship better, just be like, I remember when, right after I shot that video about this talk, as I remember right after I made the video, that I started feeling really good, and I went and I bought flowers, and I came home to my fiance and I said, I love you so much, and we really had a good night because I just started thinking, how many ways can I make her happy? And I surprised her and I did all this stuff. Or if you wanted to picture how you made a ton of money, if you started talking about it as if it already happened, you're like, if you picture that yesterday you made $100,000 in 2 weeks, and your mind starts to see it as fact, it'll want to close the loop of how you got there. So if you start saying, man, I remember how last night I did make $100,000 because the 2 weeks after I made that video, I got into a zone, and I started really feeling good and getting myself to a place that everything was possible. And I went and I performed at that college convention, and I got so in the zone that I ended up booking tons of schools, and every one of them came up to me, and then I filmed it and I made the documentary, and that got them into it, and I got a big standing O at the event. Imagine if you had something that you were nervous about, like a performance, but you talked about it from the standing ovation. You were like, here's how I got a standing ovation. Right away when you say that outcome, your mind and your body start to picture how it got there. So all the time you could be like, I remember how I got there. So you're about to perform stand-up, let's say, and you go, here's how I got a standing O. And then your mind says, how did we do it? And it goes, well, I got into the zone, I started feeling really good. And your mind starts subconsciously channeling all the other times you've ever really done good at something so that they can line up with it. And don't ever say the negative too. A lot of times people go, okay, so here's how I stopped being nervous. That's like typing to MapQuest, don't take me to Tacoma. Instead, you want to say how you got in the zone. Here's how I got in the zone. Instead of saying, here's how I got over the person, or here's how I stopped worrying about the thing, or here's how I got out of that crappy job, you instead say how you got into the job that you liked, or how you did find the person that you want, or how you became free. You don't even want in the vocabulary the thing that you don't want.